Hello, everybody. My name's James. Welcome to a very special Planet FPL podcast. I'm delighted to be joined by women's football correspondent Lauren Harris to preview the Women's Super League season. How are you, Lauren?
I'm good, thank you, James. How are you?
Yes, well, thank you, mate. Obviously, Women's Super League starts this weekend, but it does feel like we probably need to cover off what's happened since we last spoke, which was on the eve of the Women's World Cup final. Firstly, thoughts on England. Came up short, obviously, in the final, but Spain were deserving winners, weren't they?
Yeah, they were deserving winners. I think it's what English people have maybe come to expect from football. It was a bit more like what we're used to, uh, being let down in a bit of an exciting final. But no, I definitely think Spain were the better team. Thinking about the fact that they lost 4-0 to Japan earlier in the tournament seems wild now, but throughout, after that, quarters, semis, and their performance in the final, they were definitely deserved winners,
Do you feel let down
unfortunately.
at all?
Maybe not let down. I think it was just there was so much hope. And I really did think we were going to go and win it. And I think the performance in the final just didn't feel how I expected it. I didn't, I don't think the players performed as well as they could have done, which is maybe a little bit frustrating. Um, and maybe, little things like Lauren James, if she hadn't been sent off, she probably would have started the final. If she started the final, maybe could have been different. So, there's a few what ifs, but I think, we can still be very proud of how the girls did.
Yeah, absolutely. I certainly agree with the sentiment that I think the girls didn't play to their full potential in the final was the disappointment, not the result. It's
No,
it's it's knowing that having watched them a lot over the last couple of years that they can play much better than that.
yeah,
And there were things. I mean, it seems ridiculous to be critical of Serena Weigman, but as I said to you, like it was like we went so direct so early, throwing Millie Bright up front when it was so long to
yeah,
go, and we just lost the cohesion of trying to get back into the game. But a few things were disappointing on the day, but we have to credit the Spanish, who certainly were the better team in the final on the day. The fallout
yeah.
from what happened afterwards was obviously huge and reverberated around the entire football world. What was your thoughts as an outsider looking on what happened with the situation with the Spanish ladies afterwards?
Well, I think first and foremost, I wasn't surprised when it happened. It wasn't, a lot of people were shocked by it, but I think everything we'd heard about Spanish football, the Spanish FA, and, the kind of misogyny that was going on, and the way that they reacted to the fallout afterwards, none of it's really a surprise. And I think that kind of just shows why, you had players not going to the World Cup in the first place and why there's still protests from the players now, even though obviously Rubiales has resigned and Vilda's been sacked. They're still kind of not resting on their laurels. They're going for more. So I think obviously it was a ridiculous thing to happen, and I think everything in the wake of it, him trying to get Hermoso to lie to the world, and the manager joining in, and his mum going on hunger strike, and all that nonsense. Yeah, that is all baffling. But as disappointed as I was with England losing, I don't think any of this would have happened in the sense of Rubiales would still be in his job. Builder may have gone if they'd have lost the final, but they wouldn't now have this change happening in Spanish women's football that is happening if they'd lost. So we can kind of take that as a positive.
Yeah,
Um,
we spoke 2 days before the final. We sort of said that if they won it, it would be because of talent on the pitch, a kind of around the adversity that was going on around them, and then
yeah,
obviously what happened with the ceremony afterwards, and then all the events that unfolded afterwards just showed exactly how bad the situation was. And if it's Vilda's assistant is in charge temporarily, is it still the case? I feel like it
yeah,
feels like there's an acceptance that because it was so short term till the Nations League games, which were obviously only just last week, that's a temporary solution and it's okay, but that also can't continue. It's messed up, isn't it?
yeah. I mean, they're still like they were something to get up at something crazy like 3 a.m. for a journey for to get to their Nations League game because they were either getting the coach or the method of transport was some cheaper way. Can you imagine any elite
No.
like men's football team getting up at 3 a.m. and traveling to a game? It just wouldn't happen because the players need to recover. It's just all those kind of things that I think that's what the players are angry about. You still got Mappy and Leon is still, even though Vilda's gone and Rubiales is gone, Mappy and Leon is still not playing for Spain. So there's still more to the story. I'm sure there's more to come, but I think it's good that I think what's happened and the reaction around the world has kind of given them the confidence and the power to really hold the Spanish FA to account, which is good.
A lot of solidarity for the players that obviously won the World Cup. As we say, it's unfortunate there's a few players that missed out on the squad in the first place because of problems. But for those who don't know, it was a total of 81 Spanish players were up until I think as little as 48 hours before their game with Sweden were refusing a potential call-up. So it wasn't just members of the squad. It was people who might have been next in line went, don't call us because we're not coming either. And obviously there's been massive solidarity from the rest of the football world, which includes our Lionesses, have come out in massive support. And I know the Swedish ladies who played them the other day did some joint stuff with them as well.
Yeah, it almost looked like it had been the players had kind of made this sign themselves because it was just like this little black font. But Alexia Putellas had it behind her back, and then they did the team photo. They kind of unravelled it sort of in a secretive manner, and then the Swedish players joined them. And so, yeah, all of that's
I presume if it was planned, Lauren, it probably would have got nicked off them. So,
yeah, possibly, yeah. So that was well done by the players. But yeah, more to come. I'm sure we will, whenever we next talk, we'll probably have more to discuss on the matter.
Yeah, I suspect that story will rumble on a more positive note in terms of England and the upcoming start of the WSL season. Does it feel to you kind of once again that the league really needs to capitalise on this positive energy that the Lionesses have given off?
Yeah, definitely. And I also think the signing, some of the players that have come to the league in the summer, is another signal of intent from a lot of the WSL clubs. I think the quality this season is going to again go up a notch. And last season was probably the most competitive WSL season in recent years, and I think this season is going to be even more competitive. A lot of clubs have made some good signings, and players want to come and play in the WSL, which is really positive. So,
Dawn Airy, who's the chairwoman of the WSL at the moment, has targeted the league being able to generate £1 billion, the first global women's league to do so inside the next decade. Do you think that's something that's realistic?
I think it depends on how well they execute the business plan, and I think it depends how well they build their target audience. There's still some parts of scheduling and things like that I think are restrictive and are going to prevent that from growing. And so they need to obviously keep looking at ways to get fans coming to the games and get fans not just coming for one game a season when they're playing in the men's ground. How can you keep them coming back week on week? There's quite a few. I think there's 4 games this weekend in the men's grounds, which is a good kind of opener. Hopefully they'll be able to get some big crowds and you'll get people, enjoying that opening game and then sort of sticking to it. But you've got to keep that buy-in. And I think that scheduling is going to be a massive part of that. All the games are on Sunday, which is good and bad. Good in the sense that Sundays generally are, in comparison to men's football, most matches happen on a Saturday, don't they? But I've spoken about this before on women's football podcasts. You've got massive amount of women's footballers playing matches on Sundays, and people, if you want to try and grow grassroots women's football, obviously everything has to kind of grow together in order for women's football to keep going. You've kind of got to figure that out. I mean, this weekend it's FA Cup weekend in women's football for the smaller clubs, and for smaller clubs that's going to be quite a big opportunity for them to try and get people in. And And so with the WSL games all happening on the Sunday, if you live near a WSL team, you're going to go and watch the WSL team, which is great for the WSL, but they've got to try and think about how can they grow the game throughout the sort of pyramids so that generally people are following women's football more. But it's challenging. I think she said she wanted that in the next 10 years, did she?
Yeah, next decade. So
Yeah.
she was targeting 2033.
Yeah. So I mean, there's obviously a long time away. And I think the growth that's happened in the last sort of 2 to 3 years, obviously, if it keeps exponentially growing like that, then sure. But they've got to execute that business plan.
When I come back to kickoff times, but I just think part of this particular part of the topic with the Women's Super League is it is going to go under some form of reform very soon. It's currently kind of got a new code name that's going to start from 2024-25, where basically the FA is going to pass the competition on. We don't know to who yet. Do you feel like that could just be the Premier League? Is that really obvious?
Yeah, I mean, that would probably make sense. I think it's really important, though, that they don't, obviously it's called the Women's Super League, but they don't make it into, a Super League where you can't get relegated or promoted, because originally when they originally created it, it was that. And then obviously it's kind of linked now with the leagues. So I think that's important. But yeah, I mean, I think what some clubs have done really well, like Arsenal, Chelsea and City, is they've very joined up with the men's side. So all of like social media, the promotions, like the kit launches, everything has been really sort of joint in recent years. And obviously that exposure that you get from fans following the men's team and seeing the women, seeing the fact that they're like in the gym together at Arsenal, they're really close. They sort of train in the gym at the same time sometimes. And I think when you've got players like Declan Rice and Saka, like sort of outwardly bigging up the women's team, that's then naturally going to make people take notice and sort of follow. So I think, yeah, the men's side's definitely got a role to play in that. Liverpool women are moving into Melwood, which is really good for the women's side in terms of having that quality place to train at. So there are little things that are happening maybe under the surface, and all of those little things will help to improve the game. So
yeah, I mean, it's small little steps happen everywhere. Like Tottenham had their fan forum last week, and Beth England was there as one of the members on the stage as Tottenham's captain, and kind of a joint as a women's and a men's team together. I think, in fairness, I'd have to credit Arsenal. It feels like more than any other club. I mean, they've sold in excess of 45,000 tickets for the game on Sunday. I think of the promotional video, like you said, for things like Alessia Russo's signing. It felt like a big deal. Like when you were seeing that on social media on the day, wow, it could be that they're unveiling a men's player here with respect. Like it was a real big deal and a proper unveiling video, which everybody knew that she was signing. But it's still, when you watch the video, that's Arsenal making a really big deal out of this. And I think that's what you're alluding to, isn't it?
Yeah, Arsenal are really good on social media. And I think it helps that I think some of the players at Arsenal are universally liked generally. So like Leah Williamson, Beth Mead are obviously massive sort of Lioness players. Russo obviously joining now. Katie McCabe, Irish captain. They're all kind of like big names in women's football in there, and they know how to promote that product. So yeah, I mean the other thing is this season they are bringing in. So you used to, if you went to a women's football game, it was mixed fans, but they're bringing in this season an away fan end in every single game, which I think will help. You want to kind of, obviously we want women's football to stay friendly and nice and family friendly, but I think building up those sort of chants and that fan buy-in is, again, if you feel connected to the club, then you're more likely to keep coming back, because if you're connected to the players and the team winning and so on, then that all helps, doesn't it?
Yeah, we did a Patreon pod, you and I, over a year ago, and one of the words I asked you about was like tribalism in terms of women's football. Science Suj always references in terms of the men's game of tribalism between the two, and like we said, like you don't really have that in the women's game, and I don't think anybody wants it to quite go to the excess that it does to in terms of the hatred and stuff within the women's game. But things like that and having a bit of an atmosphere and a to and fro and stuff can only help the game. And certainly these are tendencies like what you'll see at the Emirates at the weekend. And I use them as a reference because they've been consistent, right? In terms of their attendances and getting really good crowds at the Emirates. I mean, to go back to your point on Sunday and the kickoff times and the fact all the games on Sunday, it's kind of a no-win situation, because if Arsenal were playing Liverpool on the Saturday, when Arsenal were also playing, you probably wouldn't get that volume of crowd. And I guess that's maybe the same with Villa and Manchester United. It's 12:30. It's going to be on BBC One this weekend. Chelsea and Tottenham in the Women's Super League actually takes up the kind of the Super Sunday spot, if you will. It kicks off a little bit later, but there's no 4:30 Premier League men's game this weekend. That's what goes in after Nottingham Forest and Brentford in the men's Premier League at the weekend. Would you get the crowds in the same way and the exposure if it was just popped in with the English Premier League, but then it counteracts what you said about participation in women's football at grassroots level and stuff? It feels like a no-win.
It's really hard. Yeah, what they need to do is they need to think who is our target audience, who do we want to be coming to matches, and that's who they need to target. And obviously at the moment they are looking at, well, the men's fans, there is a lot of them, and that if they start coming to games, that's going to generate a lot more income, which I do get. I completely understand that. And I think what's great is in the UK you can watch all of the games on TV. So one of them's on BBC Two, one's on Sky Sports, but the ones that aren't are all on FA Player, which is a bit naff because the commentators are terrible, but they don't show replays. But you can watch the games, so it's accessible, which is good. Unlike some of the Premier League games.
Do you think, kind of in comparison to lower league football and sort of like the EFL providers, do you think that stops people going? The fact that, say, West Ham and Man City's on the FA Player on Sunday afternoon, would that stop people going, do you think?
I think if you're interested enough in women's football, I think you would make the trip, particularly for the opening game. And I mean, like West Ham, for example, Man City are an attractive team to go and watch. So maybe Bristol City versus Leicester, if you're local to Bristol, you're maybe not going to be so tempted to go and watch because they're playing a small,
but then you might be if you're a Bristol City fan, having just got in the league. And it's the same thing, right? The men's team will play in the Championship on Saturday.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think it's so hard to know who they should target, and I think that's why the whole trying to get £1 billion within the next decade, it is going to be really hard, because you've got to get it right, and you've got to kind of find that winning formula. In
your opinion, if you were scheduling every Women's Super League game to be played on the same day at the same time, what would you, as a fan, what would you want it to be?
Well, I'm biased because I play football on Sunday, so I'd want it to be like Saturday lunchtime, for example. You're only ever going to have one Premier League game at that time, if any. But I guess you do, like, so in terms of watching on the television, you're going to get more audiences. In terms of actually going to games, obviously, if you're a season ticket holder of a men's team and your team are away, or you're not playing nearby, then you're not going to go. So that's why I say, for me, biasedly, Saturdays. But I do understand, the whole scheduling of Sunday and the comparison with men's football, and the fact that there's been more opportunities to use men's grounds, for example. Unless they're on television on the Sunday, it's likely that you're going to be able to use that ground, for example.
I feel like they're trying different things, and that's partly because they don't know the answer. And I'm not sure I've heard a reasoning yet from any fan that can say definitively this would be the right course of action for women's football. You and I have spoke, for example, about the problems with the 6:45 Sunday slot, for example. But if you look at the TV games that are coming up, So you got Aston Villa, Manchester United, 12:30 Sunday, which doesn't clash
Yeah.
against any men's football bar, sort of the opening 20 minutes of Forest Brentford. Then Chelsea, Tottenham in the women's at 5:30, doesn't clash with anything. Next Friday on the 6th, got Manchester United and Arsenal on a Friday night, 7:30 kickoff. Then on the following Sunday, you got Manchester City and Chelsea, which is a big game, 12:30 on a Sunday on BBC Two. Liverpool and Aston Villa's got the 6:45 slot. The following week, Chelsea and West Ham play 5:30 on the Saturday on Sky Sports. And then you've got Arsenal and Aston Villa 2 o'clock on BBC, and Liverpool and Everton at 4:30 on Sky. So I don't even think there's two games even in the same slot there. So it feels it looks like they're probably trying to look at it and then build in terms of, right, what's the impact on attendances and obviously viewing figures. BBC's obviously going to get more viewing figures than the games that are on Sky.
Yeah. I think so. It's from a TV scheduling, that sounds really good. But I think it's important if the game is at 6:45, for example. I think last year there was a game at Anfield, Liverpool Everton, that was the Sunday 6:45. And I think those sorts of games where you know it's going to be hard for fans to get there, you need to make sure you're having those games in the smaller grounds, because I think on television, watching a game with a half empty stadium, that kind of atmosphere, it doesn't, like, if we think back to watching games in COVID, for example, it wasn't as enjoyable, was it? So if you've got it in a smaller ground where the ground is packed out, even if there's less fans, I think that will also help, the watching it on television to be more enjoyable. So they've got to
that's also where
think about that.
Arsenal, again, to be honest, the reference have been very good with the ticket pricing. It's been sensible ticket pricing where people can go with their families, and it's affordable football versus the men's football, which probably isn't affordable for your average family, for example. And it feels like that's important. If you take an example, I use the example again, it was something to discuss in one of our Patreon pods back in May about Tottenham had a game with Reading when we played Brentford. We played Brentford in the men's game at 12:30, and then the ladies' game I think was at 4:15. That was a really long time to hang around afterwards. And also, the men's team was shit and got well beat, and everybody wanted to get out of there, right? And then, unfortunately, the ladies were left with 62,000 had been in the stadium, and I think about 2,000 stayed and watched it. And that was probably quite demoralising. And as it turned out, the ladies performed quite well and won quite handsomely on the day. But it almost feels like, could you foresee that kind of double header idea where if we did it the other way round and the women went first, I would therefore make the effort to go earlier. That would be my take.
Yeah, and even, I mean, if it is the other way around, even if you see it as, just having a drink with a mate beforehand and we'll watch some live football, while we're getting ready for the men's game, I definitely think that's a better way around to do it. Just going back to your point on Arsenal with the pricing, I think they did £50 for 5 home games at the Emirates, which, like you say, if you've got young fans who, parents can't afford to take them to the Emirates to watch the men, you've got an option to take them to 5 games at the Emirates for the same price as, or maybe cheaper than, 1 game in the men's. That is, a great strategy. But the double headers, just going back to double headers, it's got to be, like you say, it's got to be appealing. And I guess you've got to have that time for the players to warm up, or, the women or the men, whoever's playing first, to get out the changing rooms and then, to not ruin that routine and stuff. But that does seem like a long time to wait.
At Tottenham, they've got 2 whole different dressing rooms on the other side of the
stadium.
Really? Yeah, because they've got the dressing rooms for the American football, haven't they? So they wouldn't even have to get into each other's way. So at Tottenham, it really could be done that you could have, say, the women play at 12, let's say, and the men at 3 o'clock as an example. You could do it that way.
Maybe you should suggest it to Daniel Levy. And
well, Daniel Levy's too busy agreeing deals with stupid companies like Socios at the moment, so I don't want to go down that route at the moment. I'll stick to Meange Ball. One of the solutions that's been proposed, and I don't know if you've heard this, is around the new TV deal for the men's game, which is probably going to incorporate more games at stupid kickoff times like 6:30 on a Sunday, more Friday night games, more Monday night games. We think that the 3 p.m. TV blackout in the men's game will stick. But one of the suggestions has been that the women's game would get that slot as regular live TV coverage at 3 o'clock on a Saturday. How would you feel about that? Because then you clearly are going to get women's versus men clashes, aren't you?
Yeah, as in, do you mean going to the game?
Oh, and teams playing at the same time, like the ladies and the men playing at the same time and stuff like that.
Yeah. But I mean, if Arsenal are away at Newcastle, or let's think of a better example, Arsenal are away at Bournemouth and you can hardly get any tickets and you're an Arsenal fan and you could go to the Emirates and watch them, or you could watch Arsenal at home on the television. I mean, you might be listening to the men on the radio or maybe watching a dodgy stream, but you could what else are you going to do? You're not going to be able to go to the game, are you? And they're not going to have. I think it'd be important that the bigger clubs would play at home on those days. So, Arsenal, City, Chelsea, Man United, kind of making the most of the fixture or the fixtures during that weekend, and putting them in that prime slot. I mean, it sounds like the next few fixtures are all kind of big games.
Yeah, that's what they've gone with the early TV picks a lot. Yeah.
So yeah, but we'll have to wait and see how it kind of progresses. I mean, you can the viewing figures from the World Cup went up again. I think it is growing even more. Where again, conversations in work offices and so on, from what I've heard, people are talking about women's football more. Loads of people I know got into the World Cup who maybe didn't even get into the Euros last year until the final. They were taking notice, not just watching England games, but watching, other countries' games as well. So hopefully it is going to grow. And as I say, I think that the signings that have come into the league are going to make it, again, even more exciting, even more competitive. And I think it is really hard to call what's going to happen. So that can only be a positive thing.
I'll tell you a little story before we move on, Lauren, that in Tottenham's final pre-season friendly, we played Shakhtar Donetsk at 2 o'clock on a Sunday. And I got to the stadium quite early because I was meeting one of our patrons, actually. It was about 12:30, I think. And opposite the home end, the south stand at White Lane on the corner, there's the pub. It's a Beavertown pub. And as I got towards it, there was loads of, your big traditional burly men outside, and they're all peering through the window at this big kerfuffle. I don't know what's going on, loads of noise. What they're doing? They're watching the penalties of USA and Sweden in the Women's World Cup. And it was, as I got there, it was the amazing moment with the one that bounced on the line.
Yeah.
It was like a fractional not in, wasn't it? Incredible scene for goal line technology to use in the penalty shootout. But it just showed you that the interest, even in that circumstance, it was there. It did capture the imagination. It will continue to do so, I think, mate. Let's talk the Super League then. How many teams have we got in contention to win this league this year? And can anyone dethrone Emma Hayes' Chelsea?
Yeah, I mean, I do think Chelsea will win it again. But, I mean, in the last sort of 2 or 3 years, other teams have been getting gradually closer and closer. It's still been getting to the last day. And, I mean, it got to the last day last season and, that Chelsea could have lost the title, but you never really thought they would because they keep getting to the last day and playing teams that you'd expect them to beat. This season, the last game of the season is Chelsea versus United, which is
wow.
Yeah, that's could be quite big. I mean, I don't think Man United would be as good as they were last season. I think Arsenal will be the contenders if they don't have another injury crisis season like they did last season. But I mean, arguably, Arsenal, City, and United, even possibly Villa, could, cause upsets. I think personally, Arsenal and City are probably the only two teams that will push Chelsea. And I do think Chelsea will have, as ever, an eye on the Champions League. They'll be desperate to win the Champions League
Has it become kind of like a crusade for them, like kind of as felt for like Pep and Man City? Is there
Yeah, I think
similarities
so.
here?
Yeah, obviously they got to the final and so close and obviously lost. They lost to Barca in the semi last season, which obviously Barcelona went on to win the whole thing, and you probably have them as favourites this season as well. And I think Emma Hayes has won everything in the women's game apart from the Champions League, so definitely they will be eyeing that. They've made a lot of signings, which they have strengthened the squad. So we'll have to see how it goes in the Champions League. But yeah, I would say Chelsea are definite favourites for the league, just because they've shown in recent years that they've just got that consistency and um, the maturity to, a bit like Pep City, sort of see it out in the
Lost a
latter
couple of big name
stages.
players though, haven't they?
But they have, yeah, Harder and Ericsson have left. But the players they've brought in, so they've brought Macario, who is an American striker. She was playing for Lyon. She's very good. I think she's 23, young, hot talent, and the type of player that you'd expect to thrive under Emma Hayes. They've signed Lawrence, Canadian fullback, who's very experienced, played in 3 World Cups. She was Canadian Player of the Year. Again, she's sort of been there in the biggest games. They've also signed Hannah Hampton back from Aston Villa, so they've now got 3 international goalkeepers. Their goalkeeping
They've got 5,
depth
haven't
is
they? I read.
well, 3, I'd say, international goalkeepers that I'd say that those 3 are stronger maybe than the other 2. But yeah, I mean they've signed, I think, about 10, 15 players, but quite a few of them they've put back out on loan. But you can see that there's a lot of potential for the future.
That's unlike Chelsea to like buy too
Well,
many players and send them out on loan. That's very unfamiliar. At least it's not just the men's team. Why have 3 quality goalkeepers though? Have you got any theory on that?
well, I think Emma Hayes likes to rotate. Obviously the women's calendar is getting busier and busier. You've got the Continental Cup as well as the FA Cup, the league schedule, the Champions League. The international calendar is again also bigger. The World Cup finished just over a month ago, and we've already had 2 sets of internationals already with England. So I think the amount of injuries, for example, that players are getting. I think she just wants to have a strong squad, and she's got the best team in the country, so people want to play for her. So
No, fair. Talking of that on fixture schedule probably leads nicely into Arsenal, who got to the Women's Champions League themselves last year. They're out.
yeah,
What was all that about them playing a qualifier like 3 weeks before the season
yeah,
started? Is that because of the problem with the scheduling and the moving of the World Cup a little bit? Is that what the problem was here?
the qualifiers are always, I guess, a bit like in the men's game. Villa had to play that qualifier, didn't they? It's similar to that, but I think because of the World Cup, the players didn't get that rest that they would normally get. And a lot of them looked tired, to be honest, which you'd expect. I mean, when you think about how hard they fought last season to finish in the Champions League place, finish level on points with City, and just got 3rd place in goal, with goal difference, to then go out in the first sort of set of qualifiers is, yeah, frustrating for Arsenal fans, I'm sure. The fact that Russo left United, who are now in the Champions League, and Arsenal aren't, to go to Arsenal. I think it was really disappointing for English women's football, as well as if you're an Arsenal fan. But I think the Champions League, the whole system needs sort of overhauling. Really, I think it needs to be expanded with the natural expansion of women's football quality across the European leagues. It's
they would have had to have another qualifier as well. Is that
yeah,
right?
yeah.
And
So Man United,
Manchester
are
United
in
got a qualifier as well.
yeah, and they're playing PSG, so it's not conceived. They
They
could
could go
easily
out
go
as
out
well.
against PSG. Yeah, and then you've just got Chelsea.
So is the Women's Super League, would that be considered in Europe at the moment as the strongest league? Or is that like La Liga or Liga? And what would be the strongest European league, if you will?
I would say across the league, the WSL is probably the most competitive. Has the, in terms of when you think you've got Rachel Daly playing for Aston Villa, who finished fifth, she was the top goal scorer in the league. She was starting at the World Cup for England. Okay, not in her position, but when you think about that kind of situation, there aren't, there was maybe one player in the Spanish team outside of Madrid and Barcelona that was playing regularly. Germany, Wolfsburg and Munich are both strong, but below that again, it's not huge. PSG and
Georgia
Leon.
Stanway just signed for Bayern Munich, did I say?
She signed last season, so she played for them
Okay.
last season, but she's extended her contract, which is good, I think, because you always wonder with players moving abroad, English players who don't speak the language. I know that she was really struggling to learn the language, but she's obviously enjoying it, and she got Player of the Season last season. So, hopefully that's again going to help her to improve her game.
Her and Harry Kane can go out for dinner and speak German.
Yeah.
And enjoy
She did say
Oktoberfest.
she was asked if she'd teach him some German, and she said she didn't know any herself, so she couldn't do that.
Listen, I've said enough nice things about Arsenal on this podcast, much more than I'd say on if we were talking about the men's team. So, sympathy for Arsenal going out of Champions League, zero, nada, forget it. I need to start building up a rivalry with this ladies' team. Don't know, but in fairness, with them being out of it, and I know they were missing a lot of key players through injury last year. There's a lot of people in the know who think they're probably going to push Chelsea hardest. Would that be fair?
Yeah, and I expected them to last season, and if they hadn't have got those injuries, then I think they could well have done. The fact that they got to the Champions League semi-final and they got within seconds of getting to a penalty shootout in the semi, shows the strength that they've got. I mean, they've signed a ridiculous amount of good players. Obviously, Russo, Ilestedt from Sweden, who scored all those goals in the World Cup, strong centre back. They've lost Raffaele, Brazilian centre back, but I think Ilestedt is a good replacement. They've also signed Cadena from Barcelona, who played most of the games for Spain at the World Cup. The only game she didn't play was the 4-0 loss against Japan, so maybe that says something about how good she is. Cooney Cross, Australian player who started, I think, every game for Australia in the World Cup, who obviously got to the semi-finals. And Lacasse from Benfica, who I'm not sure that she'll be a regular starter, but she's a type of player that will definitely strengthen their squad. Not to mention Beth Mead is pretty much back. Miedema is nearly back.
Yeah, two key players. And Adam Pritchard loves Miedema. It's always going on about her.
Yeah, I mean, before her injury, she was arguably the best, or one, if not one of the best strikers in the world. Williamson is back in January, I believe. So that will be a big, boost for them, sort of maybe going into the important part of the season. So yeah, I think they've definitely got a great chance. And I think if anyone is going to topple Chelsea, it will be Arsenal. And like you say, because they haven't got the Champions League and Chelsea do, and Chelsea are so desperate to win that Champions League, that could later in the season, work really well for them. They've just got to try and keep their players fit if they can.
And similarly for Manchester City, Champions League this season either. It seems like the squad's a little bit more settled. It seems like they've had quite an overturn of players in previous seasons. It seems the squad's a little bit more settled this year going into this one.
Yeah, there's only really one outgoing and one incoming. So Hayley Rasso's gone to Real Madrid, but they've signed Jill Roord, who is a Dutch player, had a fantastic World Cup, and she's a really strong player. So she will definitely boost the team. Obviously, they've got Bunny Shaw, who's a great player to watch. Lauren Hemp, Chloe Kelly. The depth in their squad is really strong, and I think it was surprising last season that they didn't maybe push more. But yeah, I think personally,
they had a really bad start, didn't they?
Yeah, I think part of that could be to do with the amount of Lioness players that they've got, and that hangover from the Euros of being able to get yourself motivated and going again when you've had such a high, to then coming back to the WSL. I think some of those players would have struggled with that. Yeah, I've kind of done like a 1 to 12 prediction, and I've put City third. So
Yeah,
yeah, I think
that's what I thought you were going to. I presume that's Arsenal second, is it, and Chelsea first?
yeah. But I do think Chelsea will win it, but I do think Arsenal got a great chance. It's not
I mean,
cut and
Chelsea
dry.
have won the last four, is it, or the last
Mhm.
three?
This will be
Um,
their fifth. Yeah, if they win
yeah,
it this
I mean
season.
that would be it already is an amazing achievement, obviously what they've achieved, but they're not odds on with the bookies. They're odds against, and I think that's because there is a feeling that at least one of Arsenal or City will probably run them close.
Yeah, I'd imagine the signings that Arsenal have made will be a huge part to play in that, because they've got 5 signings that could all easily start in any WSL team, I'd say. And so the strength that they've now got in the squad is ridiculous, really. They've got the most valuable squad. Their squad is more expensive than Chelsea, so that shows just how big that investment has been.
For Manchester United, have we just got bad vibes at the moment?
I
Obviously,
think they've got
Russo
bad vibes to the
going
club in
and
general.
Mary Earps is something's going. What's going on with Mary Earps?
Well, they've signed another goalkeeper, which makes me think that Earps may go in the winter. I wouldn't be surprised.
We
She's
think
maybe,
Arsenal want to get her as well.
yeah, and I think she might think stay at United for now, play in the Champions League, see if they go through, because she'll want to play in Europe. I think she could easily go to any of the top European teams and start for them. So it might just be, she's waiting to see what opportunities are going to be best for her, because she's not, she's not young, and this is sort of, she's got to make the most of whatever move she does next. Is probably going to be, the biggest move in her career. She's not going to have, many more years at the top, so she's got to make the most of it while she can.
Why is this bad vibe? Everything I kind of read or hear about the United ladies team coming into feels kind of down, and obviously their ladies team has been on a kind of a real fast track and quick progression, right? Finished only a couple of points short of Chelsea, yet most people don't think they'll go that close again.
Well, they've lost on a Battier, who was arguably their best player last season. She's gone to Barcelona to challenge Lucy Bronze for the right back position. Um, they've kind of been letting players go. So they've let Hansen go to Villa, who seems a great prospect. She played really well against England the other night in the Scotland game. I think there's, like with the men's team, I think there's just a negative feeling around the club in general, isn't there? I mean, they threw the women's team under the bus with the whole Greenwood situation. Obviously, I think facilities, training, all of investment from that sort of perspective, infrastructure. I don't think that Man United are a club that are as appealing to go to for the players as Arsenal, Chelsea, City will be, because they just aren't offering that infrastructure. I think the manager also has come under he came under a lot of criticism last season, which, considering they finished second and they got to the FA Cup final, I think was probably a bit unfair. But there's kind of a criticism that he is a bit stuck in his ways, and he won't rotate the team if players are tired or things are going wrong. I think the fact that players have left or want to leave is also kind of raising question marks of what's going on behind the scenes. So yeah, I mean, I put United to finish fifth behind Villa, which is probably wishful thinking, but
well, that kind of answers our next question, because I assumed we'd probably move on and talk about Villa next. That top four, United, City, Chelsea, and Arsenal, have been the same top four in one order or another since 2020. I was going to ask you if you felt it was becoming a closed shop. I'm going to guess from your prediction, the answer is no.
Yeah, I think the rise that Villa had last season, the fact that they've kept, those players within the squad, and they've strengthened. They've signed Van Domselaar from the Netherlands, who's the Netherlands' #1 goalkeeper. Obviously, Hampton's gone back to Chelsea, but I'd say Van Domselaar's a better, more experienced goalkeeper. So they've got, a lot of quality in there. They've signed Ebony Salmon, who coincidentally used to play for Man United, went to America, really hot talent. Has been in a few of the England squads, but it's kind of on the fringes. She's, young, but she's quick. She's, an exciting sort of winger forward. And they've got Hansen from United, who I think it's strange that they let her go, because again, she seems like a really strong player. And they've got Carla Ward, who I think is a really good manager. They seem to have obviously they've got Jordan Nobbs from Arsenal, and she's stayed. They seem to have a really nice team, ethic and atmosphere. And Rachel Daly, if she can emulate the same sort of number of goals as she did last season, I just think that they've got momentum. I think they've got, they've made the squad stronger. And as I said, it might be wishful thinking, but I do think that they'll get closer to the top 4 at least this season.
I think I saw a stat that Daly scored more goals last season than Villa as a team had scored in the previous 2 seasons.
Wow. Yeah. Well, she scored 22, so that's probably fair, because before last season they weren't.
Like, that can't be quite right, but I think it's close. I think I saw Villa scored 25 in their previous 2 seasons before last season, because they're very much on an upwards trajectory. So maybe it was Daly in all comps might have been what possibly. I might have seen, possibly.
Yeah, I mean they had significant improvement last season, and you just think if they can go that one step further this season, then yeah.
And but it's top 3 for Champions League, though, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah. I think it'd be nice if they introduced a Europa League style competition, to be honest. But again, that's maybe something.
Well, I imagine if you end up with circumstances like, obviously, Arsenal will finish 3rd and are not going to get in the Champions League this year. If United go out as well, and there's only one English representative, there's going to be noises about either reform of that competition in terms of getting more in from the more powerful leagues, if you will. Not that the teams that have knocked them out are not deserving. So expanding that competition at least, say, or where's your Europa League, if you will, yeah. But at the moment, it's difficult to foresee a Villa getting into Europe, isn't it? Despite the growth.
Yeah, I can't see them getting top 3. And Pippin predicting them to finish above United is probably not realistic, but it's wishful thinking. I mean, United have signed Miyazawa from
Japanese player.
Yeah, who scored the hat-trick against Spain. Geisa from Brazil, who Brazil obviously didn't do amazing in the World Cup, but she's a hot talent as well. So it's not like they haven't bought good players. I just think the general feeling around the club, and probably my biased views of not liking Man United.
Those who don't know, Lauren's a Liverpool fan. Well, on that bombshell, I presume after Villa, you've predicted in your league table the mighty Tottenham Hotspur, Lauren, haven't you?
Tottenham, I've put 4th bottom, which is where they finished last season, to be fair. So would be consistent.
Consistently shit. Okay, thanks. So who would be making up the top half then? Is it Liverpool?
Well, I ambitiously have tipped Liverpool to finish above Everton. We to be fair, we finished 7th last season, which, considering it was our first season back in the WSL, was actually a very good finish. We were 7 points off Everton last season, and Izzy Christensen has retired, is now on Sky Sports a lot, and Gary Robinson keeps confusing
thinking that she's Steph Houghton.
Yes. So she'll be a big miss for Everton. And they've signed a couple of players, but they haven't signed any, big name players. So again, probably wishful thinking. We've made quite a few good signings. We signed Roman Haug, Norwegian striker. She scored hat-trick. Who did they beat? Someone 6-0 in the group stages. I can't remember who it was. Who was in their group? New Zealand.
Oh, for Norway.
Yeah, was it an African nation? I can't for the life of me remember.
Who did New Zealand lose to? New Zealand had a good result, and then didn't they lose to someone else?
Yeah, they won the opening game. I'm getting the
I'll find
Australian
out for you.
group.
I'll find out for you.
Yeah,
Carry
I
on.
can't. Well, anyway, she scored a hat trick in the World Cup, so she's probably going to be top goal scorer. Who knows? So yeah, it's a good signing. Um, I'd like to think we'll finish mid-table again. I've got West Ham going a bit further down. I think the dark horses this season will be Brighton. So they finished second bottom last season and they were quite close to relegation, but they've signed 11
Yeah,
players
massive overhaul players. Yeah.
and not just like 11, you know, bit part players. They've signed some really good experience. They've signed Vicky Lasada, who used to play she played a bit for City. She used to captain Barcelona. They've signed Bremer, Farissa Dossier, who was playing at Man United, sort of when Casey Stoney was there. So I think Brighton will probably finish mid-table, which they were really poor last season. They've also got Katie Robinson as well, young English talent who she didn't get on in the World Cup, but she'll definitely be a star for the future. And then I've put Tottenham Sun at kind of at the bottom of that mid-table.
What are you saying? Sort of Liverpool, Brighton, Everton, then Tottenham, or
I
Everton above Brighton?
I'd put Everton above Brighton, but to be honest, it'll probably be Everton, Brighton, Liverpool. But we'll see.
The answer to the question you're looking for is Philippines, Laura.
The Philippines, that's it. Not an African side at all.
So hang on, right? I've got the brilliant Beth England up front. What are you telling me about fourth from bottom? Come on.
Well, Beth England's had hip surgery, and she's
That's
got
the problem.
Yeah, there's no kind of timeline on her return, so
we're in trouble.
Yeah, not in trouble. You've made a couple of signings.
Yeah, tell me about. Do you know anything about Martha Thomas, who's come from Manchester United?
No, to be honest, I don't. Has she had any appearances? Because I don't.
No, it's not a name. I just know Tottenham.
No,
Tottenham got her from. She's a forward, so I was thinking she might stand in for England in the short term.
Possibly, but she's not. She definitely wasn't starting games last season. You've signed Artinen, who is Finnish, but played in. She's not finished, but she played in Sweden last season. So I'm sure Rasmus probably might know a bit about her. I've never seen her play, but there seems to be quite a lot of positivity around her. But yeah, I think definitely England was a massive part of the fact that she was third top goal scorer in the WSL. To not have her goals is going to be quite challenging.
I looked at the odds for top goal scorer, and I mean she's listed about fifth or sixth, despite the fact she'd be playing for a team that would be expected to finish in the bottom half, which I think in this league gives you a real indication of her talents in front of goal. I mean, she essentially helped keep the club up with the goals she scored in the second half of last season.
Definitely. Yeah, she was a great signing, to be honest. And obviously she made the move to get into the World Cup squad, which she did. And, she ended up playing her part in the World Cup, coming on, scoring the penalty and so on. But she's going to be a huge myth. I don't know how long it takes you to recover from hip surgery, but the fact that there's an indefinite absence
I've not had mine yet, but I presumed it will come. So bottom three, is it just one going down still?
Yeah, I think it's hard to see anything other than Bristol City going down, to be honest. The signings they've made have all been, they've signed some championship players who probably, went to the top of the championship, but they haven't signed players that are of the quality to keep you in the WSL. I think Leicester are the other team that could go down, depending on. It all depends on how many points they pick up from the smaller teams. I mean, in this league, generally, it's quite hard to have upsets. We did manage to beat Chelsea last season, which was
on the opening day as well.
Yeah. But generally, it's not too common. So when you do play mid-table, lower table teams, they really are 6-pointers.
If you can put runs together and win those games, you'll get out of it, essentially, is how it feels. Is that a fair comment? Because most of the bottom half, it feels like, will probably be under a point per game. If we look at historical league tables, that's how it feels. Like a point per game is probably going to have you sort of 7th or 8th, basically, is how it feels. So, I mean, do you have that at this stage where there'd be like that mythical 40-point barrier, which it never needs to be 40 points? Is there a target in this league at the moment from that perspective? Like 16 will keep you up, for example, or
yeah, I mean, Reading only got 11 points last season, so yeah, obviously there were 2 teams that finished on 16. I think it may even be less this season with teams like Brighton getting stronger, Liverpool hopefully growing into the league a bit more. Obviously the top 5 being the top 5. I think, it could be less than 15 that will keep you up, but
because you think Bristol City will find it very difficult, I'm guessing.
Yeah, and the last time they were in the WSL, I think they lost 9-0, 8-1. They took quite a few.
But they
heavy.
did storm that league last year, and Liverpool did the year before, right? And came up and did fine.
True, but I don't know. I think you've got to. Liverpool made a few signings of players that were either established in the WSL or had played, in the NWSL in America and were maybe of a better quality. I just don't think Bristol City have made enough signings. It depends how the players do, but yeah, we'll have to wait and see. They could shock me.
It doesn't help that I think, and look, obviously Leicester's men's team got relegated, but I think most people, judging by what they've done in the championship so far, think they'll come back. But the name of Bristol City in there with the other 11 names stands out massively because the others have got Premier League backing, right? Yeah. What's the investment going to be like for that ladies team for Bristol City? Because we know about obviously what's happened, unfortunately, with Reading's relegation means they've now gone part-time.
Well, being in the WSL, they will get a salary that means that they can just play football, for the time being. But I think it's everything else that comes with it. The travelling to games, maybe the method of travelling to games. Arsenal have got their own plane, for example, or maybe they share it with the men's team. But all those sort of little details of, where you're staying, the recovery. A lot of clubs have got those cryo pods where you go in, the freezing cold and recover. Bristol City, I don't know if the men have that, but are they going to allow the women to use it? All those little things.
The wheelie bin ice baths.
Ice bath, yeah. Old school. Yeah. Yeah, so I think, like you say, you've got Bristol City as a club in your head and you think that's a smaller club. So naturally you think they're going to struggle more. All these other teams we know as big clubs, don't we, in men's football? So yeah.
I don't know. We'll see. Is the women's game moving more in this way, where that you'd foresee it being a 12 that's definitely replica of the men's game, if you will? Like, and Crystal Palace are starting to invest a little bit in their women's team, as an example I've heard recently. And you think it would be more likely in the coming years that they'll progress through rather than, say, London City, for example, that's like got its own self-backing in the championship, right?
Well, I think London City is an interesting one because they've made a lot of really good signings and they've actually been really good on social media over the summer. So a lot of people were kind of getting excited. They were doing this kind of thing where they were kind of saying, "Oh, we've got another signing coming tomorrow," and people who couldn't care less about London City Lionesses, but are interested in women's football were, really excited. Who's next? Who's next? And they've signed quite a few of the big name Irish players, who are kind of on the fringes. So you've got Rusha Littlejohn, who was starting games for Villa last season. She's now playing for them. Grace Maloney. You've got, quite a few good players that have gone there. So I think, I don't think they've made a great start to the season, but I think if a club like that got into the WSL, I think it is then harder for them, obviously, because you don't have that financial backing.
So they're not London City Lionesses, they're London City Irish now, are they? Or
yeah, pretty much. Yeah, might as well call them that. I mean, it's quite confusing that because there is a London City Lionesses, and then there also used to be a new London Lionesses women's team, and then there's Millwall Lionesses, and it's like they're all like really close to each other. It's quite confusing.
Millwall Lionesses were in the 90s, I want to say, one of the better teams. Doncaster
Yes.
Bells.
Doncaster Bells.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were at the top. Yeah. Millwall now play in the league above the league that I'm playing in. They've dropped down to tier 5. And yeah, I guess they don't have the backing. Like, AFC Wimbledon women are doing really well. They've got quite a lot of backing from the men's team. They've again done kind of like joint kit promotions.
Yeah, I'm
like
not
say
surprised
Palace.
a club like that, which is very much got fan ownership at the heart of it, is going to push through better for the development of the ladies' game. That doesn't surprise me.
Charlton have also been good. They've had quite a few games at Selhurst. No, that's
Does
Palace.
that help? We keep mentioning London clubs here. Does that help?
What, that they're in London? Or
yeah,
possibly. I mean, I always say that the London clubs.
Well, I mean, it's easier to travel around London than say, I don't know, Bolton to Blackburn, or do you know what I mean?
Yeah, there's also a bigger demographic to get young talent from as well, which I think makes a huge difference. Like Gillingham, for example, you may have the whole of Kent, but to travel to Gillingham is, really far. But you've got loads of teams in that small space in London that are kind of picking players. And obviously, North London, you've got Spurs, Arsenal, West Ham, not so far. So yeah, possibly. I mean, when you look at all of these teams, other than Bristol City, Leicester, they are in cities, aren't they? Which, as in the WSL teams, they're all teams in cities, or big cities. Yeah, but one thing I've noticed kind of playing football is that the quality of young players coming through at every single level has gone up significantly. You've got like 16-year-olds now who are playing in academies, even at grassroots level. Girls that are playing in my league are going to academies and training and playing football every single day, which just wouldn't have happened 10 years ago.
There's an obvious question here, Lauren, that I'm sure every listener or viewer is thinking it. It's like, why has no one signed you?
I'm too old. drink too much Guinness. Yeah, I'm happy to play
in with the London City Lionesses, then, wouldn't you?
Yeah, part of the Irish. Yeah, no, that's that. I do. Part of me wishes I was born now, because I definitely would have taken it more seriously. But no, it's nice to be a spectator of the game.
Just thinking about, again, the clubs that are in the WSL now, and talking about cities. And of course, there's an obvious name missing at the moment, which is Newcastle. That's going to come, surely.
Yeah, I think so. They've obviously, since the takeover, they have massively invested, and they've had a few games at St James's Park.
Yeah, I know they had a 30,000 for the cup game, I think, last year. Even though I think they're third. Are they third tier, Newcastle, at the moment?
Yes, they are at the moment. Maybe they'll get promoted, and the championship is also, the women's championship is growing in, the amount of spectators that are going to those games, and the exposure that's getting, which is good. But yeah, I'd expect Newcastle to. Do
you know what? The people up there
improve.
Will get so well behind that. Once they'll really get behind it once it hits that top league. So, do you ever foresee the league expanding beyond the 12 teams at the moment? Do you foresee that as a slow progression, or do you see that it will just get to the point where they might even merge and just push 6 from the championship, make it an 18, for example?
I think when the quality has grown enough, and enough of those young players have come through and are established in, sort of 21, 22 years old enough to sort of be playing week in, week out, I think the quality will be high enough that you could maybe, like you say, push half of the championship up and combine. You've got the sort of national league, kind of combine the national league with the championship. So you kind of cut tier 1 to 3 into 2, if you like. And again, that's going to make the league more competitive. It's going to make league positions and everything, more exciting. There's going to be more, if you've got more teams spread out around the country, then again, the teams are more accessible. We've got, what is there, 4 teams in London, 5 teams in London, 2 Manchester clubs, 2 Liverpool clubs.
Merseyside. It's nearly a league,
Bristol City obviously helps with that sort of West Country area, but there's certain parts of the country where you'd be travelling for hours to get to a game. So it would be good to see expansion.
Not far from Birmingham either, from that perspective.
I'm
pretty sure Leicester and Bristol are both classified as cities now, aren't they? As well,
I mean they're both called Leicester and Bristol City. So if they're not cities, then they're lying in their football teams, aren't they?
Are there any cities that aren't in a city? There's a general knowledge football question for someone to answer. We haven't spoken about West Ham, and I consider you'll be going mad. You think they're going to finish bottom 3?
Yeah, 3rd bottom, but they've signed Wakey. Hopefully that's how you say her name.
Wakey.
Another Japanese player. But again, I'd say they haven't had a great pre-season in the sense of signing a lot of players.
They've also taken the manager that was recently left my club.
Yes, and I don't know how successful she was at your club.
I think she was well liked, I think, but it wasn't very, in all honesty.
No,
I don't know if that's her responsibility or not. I suppose ultimately results are, but what I mean is in terms of it's a below the level of the, we might as well call it a big 4 in the WSL at the moment, for example.
Yeah, I think West Ham have kind of been that team that finished mid-table every season, and that I think that's probably about right for where they'll be again. I just think that, they possibly finish above Spurs depending on how long England's injured for, but Brighton, Everton, Liverpool, I think will be better than them. So I don't think they're relegation candidates. I just think they'll do enough to finish towards the bottom of mid-table, probably.
Champions League winner this year? How much of a chance should you give Chelsea of winning it?
I think if they can avoid Barcelona to the final, then in a final, anything can happen. And obviously, Barcelona went 2 down in the final this season, and they did find a way to win. But I think in a final, now that they've had that experience from a couple of years ago, and they've got arguably a stronger squad, you've got players like Lauren James who, I think this season will be her breakout season in WSL. Obviously, she had a good World Cup, barring the red card. But last season, she wasn't starting, every game. Emma Hayes was very cautious of her minutes and was kind of gradually introducing her. And I think this season she will explode, hopefully. So I think Chelsea have got a chance, but I think if they meet Barcelona before the final, I just think Barcelona are going to be too strong. Yeah. Bayern Munich, I think, underwhelmed in the Champions League last season. Wolfsburg are always strong. Lyon, you can never bet against. So Barcelona would be the obvious choice. And I think the signings they've made as well, again, they're strengthened and they are the team to beat. So.
Okay. Thank you very much, mate. Couple of questions before we finish. One I always forget. Where can people play WSL Fantasy, Lauren?
There's a game called She Plays, which is run by a group of volunteers. It's not the most high-tech game in the world. I guess you'd liken it to what was the lockdown game?
Oh, Chatman.
Yeah, probably.
I nearly
the
forgot. I did live
chat
streams on it. I nearly forgot.
Probably, that kind of level. But I played it in the
James
World Cup.
Alapran will be absolutely gutted with that, with his spreadsheets and stuff, mate.
I I don't mean that badly, but if we're talking about FPL, or it's just not on. It's run by volunteers, so you kind of have to be realistic with
take
where
it for
it's
what
at.
it is, basically.
Yeah, I mean, I enjoyed playing it in the World Cup. I missed a deadline or two because I was on holiday, which sort of derailed my chances. But yeah, She Plays would be the platform to play on. If you aren't sure on the players, I'd say if you watch the World Cup, look for any players that you recognise to start with, and go from there.
What a top tip, girl.
Or look at the top goals and assists as you would in FPL. But yeah, I mean, I need to set up a team. I still haven't done that. So
I take it you've not had a look at the pricing yet or anything?
Not yet, no.
I played the Euros on it, and I
Mhm.
just found the website so frustrating, which was such a shame, because I half wanted to do it to improve my knowledge and stuff as well. And I'd like to, but I don't know if I can face that website every week.
Yeah, it is frustrating. Gary Robinson,
but also I also don't want to criticize it, because I know it is people making no money out of it or anything.
Yeah.
Are they based in Australia or something?
Yes, I think they are. Yeah. And to be honest, it's almost more frustrating though that they haven't. This is another thing with, them trying to build a £1 billion league. Fantasy football, I think, has shown in the Premier League, with the amount of people playing FPL from other countries, that if you build a fantasy product, like you say, people will get to know the players more, or they'll have more of a vested interest. You might want to watch Bristol City versus Leicester at 2:00 on Sunday because you've got a player.
Exactly that. Let's not pretend right now there won't be men watching or listening to this who will watch a Premier League game at the weekend because they've got fancy investment. Will watch Forest and Brentford at the weekend because they've got Mbeumo or got Turner, or otherwise wouldn't bother. And I just think if we had a game that we could really latch on and really enjoy it would certainly help. I'm going to put the challenge out to our friends at Gaffer and say, let's get ourselves set up for next year, and the Planet FPL patrons will do the pricing. Set it up, we'll do the pricing, and let's have a proper game that we can play. And I regret not saying that 3 months ago now, to be totally honest. But yeah, if anyone from Gaffer's listening, there you go. There's the challenge. Or if anybody else wants to do it as well, I just know the Gaffer guys provide a great platform, as they do for the EFL fantasy game. And there is one men's question I have to ask you, unfortunately, Lauren, before we finish. As much as I feel like I shouldn't, what's the score? 5:30 Saturday.
If it was at Anfield, then I'd say 3-1 Liverpool. But I've been saying all week I would be happy with a draw right now, so I'm going to say 2-2. What do you think?
I think it depends on James Maddison's fitness, and I'm hoping, fingers crossed, at time recording on Thursday evening, it sounds like it might be good news. So, yeah, I mean, it'll be like, look at you. 3-2 either way, or 3-3. It's going to be a not miss.
I mean, you'll probably score in the first 10 minutes, and then
and you'll win 3-1.
Play a lot better second half. Yeah, that's what keeps happening.
That's your usual. Good luck Saturday, mate. Good luck
too.
to Liverpool in the Women's Super League, and good luck to anybody who's listening or watching who's got a team playing in the Women's Super League this season. No doubt, Lauren, you'll be joining us during the season for more women's football discussion. Thank you very much again, my friend. What have we got left for you today? Differential show for patrons, game week 7 preview show. I've got the deadline stream on Saturday morning on YouTube at 11 a.m. UK time. So you'll obviously be back with me for the game week review on Monday. Just leaves me to say thanks again so much to Lauren. Cue music, please. Man sharp.